Good day. Welcome to another edition of Ibima Mongo's Perspective on Global Affairs. Before I continue, I urge you to please press the like button so that we can get the algorithm going. And if you're new to my show, I also urge you to subscribe. I have a question. My question today is about NATO and Russia. Do you think there's a possibility that NATO and Russia will have a direct confrontation? It's very important to ask this question because some politicians are going around the whole of Europe and telling their citizens that there is a likelihood of a war between Russia and NATO members within the most believe that it will happen before 2030. They have different dates, 2 years, 3 years. So my question is this: do you think that there will be a war between a direct confrontation, not one through a proxy like Ukraine, a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia before 2030? That is the question I want to ask today, and I would like to get your comments and your opinions about it. Nevertheless, the German defense minister believes that there will be a war between Russia and NATO. He believes very strongly. German Defense Minister Boris Pistarious claims a war between NATO and Russia could break before 2029. We have always said this could be the case starting 2029. However, there are now others who say that this could be conceivable as early as 2028. And as some military historians even believe that we had in our last summer of peace already. That's what Pistorius is saying. Pistorius is telling some journalists that he believes that NATO and Russia will be having a war very soon. He very much believes so. Russia, I should point out, President Putin, his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov, and quite a lot of all the politicians around him have said that Russia has no intention to invade any European country. He has said that repeatedly that Russia does not believe that they have any strategic interest in the West. They have turned their back to the West and they are now facing East. So they don't believe that they want anything of the West. There's nothing they want there. Russia is already the largest country in the world. They have more resources. The Europeans are short of every kind of resource you can think of now. So they've conjectured. So this question about the war was put to a Russian member of the Duma. And this is what he said when he was interviewed. He said, "We are not going to fight them, but if they come to us, they will get what they deserve." This was said by the head of the State Duma Defense Committee, and his name is Katopolov. He said that he doesn't believe that he doesn't believe there will be one. In fact, there was another very dismissive statement by the head of the Communist Party in Russia. The Communist Party is still in Russia, believe it or not, and they are quite they may not be very popular, but they are quite significant and influential. And the head of the Communist Party, I forget his name, but he was very dismissive when he was asked, and he said, We've invaded Berlin. We've taken Berlin 3 times already in history. There will be nothing stopping us from taking it a 4th time. That's how confident the Russians are now. Anyway, one person who believes that the whole world has changed and Europeans should realize it is German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Friedrich Merz believes the world order that existed for the last 80 years in the West and 35 years in the East has come to an end. If we want to shape a new world order, this is only possible together with our European neighbors. Somebody has not told Friedrich Merz that Europe is not part of the equation anymore. The glory days of Europe are gone. The glory days are gone. But the Europeans are not they're not going away without a fight. They're not going away quietly into the sun. The glory days of the British Empire, the French Empire, the Germans didn't even have an empire. They just had some very few years of colonization. and imperialism. They fondled it. They were very brutal in Namibia, very brutal in Tanzania and Cameroon, where they had their land stake after the Berlin Conference. So they really don't know. But one person who does not believe that the glory days of Europe is gone is the French president. French President Emmanuel Macron hosted President Zelensky in France, and it was a show of solidarity. Pomp. There was a lot of pomp. I have the visuals here. The images are one of friendship, camaraderie. No doubt about it. The French have been very much in this war in supporting the Ukrainians. President Macron has been a big supporter of Zelensky. He hugs him anytime he sees him. He's his brother, he's his friend, he's his supporter. And today we hosted Zelensky in Paris, and it was a beautiful one. It was a very well, it showed the state and happiness between these two people. And in fact, Zelensky was so happy about it. He said, today marks a significant moment, truly historic for both our nations, France and Ukraine. Together with Emmanuel Macron, we signed a declaration of intent on cooperation on the acquisition of defense equipment for Ukraine. Yes, one of the things that came out of this meeting is that President Macron was doing salesmanship for France. He's selling Rafael planes to France. France and the whole of Europe have suddenly remembered that they have a military-industrial complex, and Ukraine is a test bed for all these plane weapon systems they want to sell. The Germans also are rebuilding their military-industrial complex. The Swedes are also telling the Ukrainians that they have Gripen planes to sell. They have had an intent to sell 150 of such planes to them, which is the Swedish plane made by Saab. And then the French today are telling Zelensky that he can buy and purchase 100 Rafael planes. Rafael planes are very, very worthy. They are 4.5 generation fighter jets. The only problem is that in recent times they had a little skirmish, just a little skirmish along the Pakistan-Indian border, and they didn't come out smoking. They came out in wreck because Operation Sindor between Pakistan and Iran, the victim of it was the Rafale planes. But nevertheless, the French are selling 100 Rafale planes. That's the intent. They intend to supply them over the course of 10 years. And by 2035, they would hope that the Rafale planes will be delivered progressively over to the Ukrainians. It just doesn't seem to matter much, though, but this is a time now that everybody wants to stimulate their domestic economy, bring back some form of industrialization, whatever form of industrialization and mechanization that still is left in Europe. They want to stimulate it, and Ukraine is the buying partner now, the buying and the willing partner that wants to buy. They are not able to sell to NATO because NATO comprehensively and collectively, wholesomely, is an American project. It's American planes, American F-35s, American infrastructure, military infrastructure that completely dominates NATO. So now Ukraine is the willing buyer, and Ukraine is being promised this. Macron also said something. He continues to insist that this war was started by Russia. He's telling us history as we may not know it. Russia alone made the choice for war, he said during one of his presentations, Macron. Nothing justified this choice, no threat, no reality, except that fake reality created by the reflexes and the instincts of a power that cannot come to terms with its history and its imperialist and frankly neo-colonialist instincts. France, very rich from the French president to be saying this. As someone who is West African by birth and origin, it's very interesting to be hearing the French president say this. Today, Russia alone chooses to continue this war and even escalate it. Everything is ready for everyone is and everything is ready for peace. Only Russia refuses. Russia has said repeatedly that they will not have a ceasefire. They want conclusion and conclusive treaty that will involve clear understanding of everybody's position. They have already laid out their terms. Ukraine is not expected to join any alliance that may be a threat to Russia. Ukraine should leave all the parts and the territories that they still control within the 4 oblasts that have been incorporated into Russia. Ukraine should dissolve their army and have only 40,000 people in the army, and Ukraine should recognize the Russian language and the Russian Orthodox Church. They are insistent on it. These are the actions taken by the Ukrainians that the Russians want to be reversed. And most of all, Ukraine should be a neutral country. They stand on those terms and those conditions, and they are not moving away from them. They say that that's the only means by which they say, and to say that Russia has imperialist instinct. In fact, we know that it is only very recently that Imperial France was chased away from Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger Republic, and Chad. They have been a clear and present colonial and imperialist country in Africa and transited very beautifully into being a new colonialist power, control the economy of all the Francophone countries. And we now know that their stay in Africa has been a tenuous one, and they've finally been kicked out. The last place they were kicked out finally was in Madagascar. And who's the beneficiary of this new reality in Africa? It's actually the Russians. they are trading security offerings to secure the new government in these places. Anyway, Zelensky did something too very important. He went to meet the fishermen who have been giving support to the Russians, I mean to the Ukrainians, by helping them donate fishing nets to them that they use in covering logistic roads that across Kherson and Zaporozhye. Unfortunately, these logistics roads, these fishing nets have been blown up most times. They can't stand the weight of artillery, but President Zelensky was very happy to meet with them. He had a very warm interaction with them, and it was a moment where he was very thankful to them. He said it very repeatedly, and there was camaraderie. This was a very, very good one for President Zelensky, coming off his visit to Greece, where he had gotten promises of gas supplies, LNG gas supplies so this is him and the fishermen. He was thanking them, and they co-opted him into their guild. It was a warm meeting with the people with truly big hearts, representatives of the Koenig Solidarity Association, National Committee of Fishermen of Brittany and France, who provide our cities with anti-drone nets, grateful for the long-term and important support which helps protect lives of our people and drones in Kherson and Zaporozhye. Well, I had a video, but I said I will just skip that one. The video was those particular net highly compromised. The Russian drones were in them, waiting for one supply truck to come by and then ambushing them. In fact, it was like a swarm of drones ambushed that particular military vehicle. It was it was very funny to see. And it was not just funny, it was frightening, because it shows you the capacity and the abilities of the Russians now regarding drone warfare. They are in a level, at a class that is outstanding, to just say the least. Anyway, going on to other matters, Ukraine is really getting a lot of support from a lot of places. I saw how one American fundraised and got a lot of cars for Ukraine that they're supplying to their military. But it is also the European Union that is also fundraising. The European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, sent out letters to all the countries and told them that the European Union has told the EU governments that Ukraine will need 135.7 billion for the next 2 years of war, and that Europeans will have to find money themselves or take joint debt if they fail to push through a reparation loan based on Russian frozen assets. That's according to the Financial Times. Victor Orban actually said that he had received that letter, and that one thing is very sure, he wasn't going to contribute to that particular cause. He was very caustic in it. I chose to skip that particular tweet of Victor Orban. Victor Orban is no fan of the European Union, all their schemes and machinations to try and grab hold of, of the monies of Russia and keep support. In fact, they even said, well, the foreign minister of Hungary actually said that they would rather donate their monies to the people of Lebanon to help their rehabilitation and their humanitarian needs in that particular country. But von der Leyen said also that given the urgency and the need to start payouts by mid-2026, Brussels says any option will be temporary and transitional. These mechanisms can also be combined. Grants and EU borrowing could serve as stopgaps until the bloc's next long-term budget takes effect. Well, another way that the European Union is trying to make sure that they get this money, by all means, especially the money of the Russians, since the Belgians are the ones who are holding off allowing this thing to happen, is that they have assured the Belgians that every country will contribute some form of risk, and they will contribute and they will bear the risk together. Because I was just the head of the Euroclear actually promised that they were going to sue if anything happened to, they will sue the European Union. In fact, they were trying to take the European Union to court if any actions are taken to lay their hands on the money that is in the Euroclear system. Anyway, Victor Orban, like I said, is not going to be supporting that action, and it is obvious that cold days and hard days are still ahead for Ukraine. Ukraine is not going to have some money for some time. Nevertheless, let's go on to the battle situation. The battle situation today, I'm not going to go into the details of it. Like I always say, there are so many mapping channels and a lot of people who tell us about this war at a level that is much more granular and much more detailed than I'll ever be able to do. Sometimes I'll talk about movements in certain neighborhoods, especially the neighborhoods that are of interest. The Pokrovsk neighborhood is definitely one that the encirclement is closing in, and it's quite a problem. But this is a map that shows us clearly all the points that the Russians are actively now having operations. And this is what is really breaking the back of the Ukrainians. In the Kharkiv region here, we see Kupiansk, we see Liman, we see Sivex. And then in the Donetsk, I think we see Konstantinovka, Pokrovsk, Guliopole corridor, which is in the Zaporozhye, and then Orikov. These are all points that the Russians are pressing on and pressing forward on. This is a stretch of 1,500 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers stretch, and it is really stretching the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainians don't have the kind of manpower that is supposed to be able to plug all the gaps in this thing. The analysts have always said that in all the operations that the Russians have been doing over the past 3 years, they tended to just concentrate on one city. But this time now, their operations are within the almost 7 to 8 cities. Yeah, but we've not added the fact that there's still operations going on, active operations in Volchansk here and in Sumy region and the Volchansk, and the Volchansk operation is even expanding it. They've practically taken over the whole of Volchansk. So Kupiansk is Liman, Sivex, Constantinople, Pokrovsk. These are all active centers that have really stretched the ability of the Ukrainians to defend the spaces that the Russians want in Zaporozhye, in Kherson. And we know that Guliopole, they are getting very close to it after the operations in Pokrovsk. They are expanding westward towards it, and there's just no response from the Ukrainians. They're really, really on the back foot. It's a big problem for them. So, but today we got more to know that in Leningrad, Russian forces are advancing through the residential areas and southern parts of the city and on approach. A total of 6.1 kilometers has been liberated. That encirclement is getting closer and closer and closer, and there's nothing anybody do about it. The Russians, I saw an interview where one of Russia's very vocal and well-known commentators on this war was saying that the Ukrainians either surrender or they'll be destroyed in Menograd. It's really not a good time for them. It's a really tough one for them. Anyway, going on to other matters, one big thing happened today. Very big, very, very big. Gaza, there's peace coming to Gaza, and that is no thanks to President Trump. President Trump has cast himself as a peace president. It's the best thing that has ever happened to the world. The only thing is that there's a conflict in dissonance in our understanding of him being a peace president and all the activities that are shaping up within the Venezuela coastline. But nevertheless, he has actually achieved one concrete one. I can attest to that. I always have said that President Trump is the only person who has influence on the Israeli state, the Israeli prime minister, the most cantankerous and the most virulent and bellicose prime minister Israel has ever had, the one who has caused them several wars and several years of conflict, and that's President Netanyahu. President Trump has a lot of influence on him. But beyond that now, in the light of the multipolar world, the fact that China represents an alternative, Russia represents an alternative, means that those days that the Americans could act without any consequence are done. If the Chinese have left your market because they are selling their treasury bonds and they're not buying, and the Russians definitely are not wanted in your market space, and your dollar is under pressure, and your treasury bills are losing, a lot is being asked of them, not many people are buying, then it simply means that the Middle Easterners now have an uncommon influence because they are the only people still playing within the American market. They play because they have money. And because that money is very much needed by America, it is very important. And they now got influence. They banded together. They came together. And this time around, they put pressure on President Trump. And President Trump took action. He pushed pressure on Netanyahu. And they've been babysitting Netanyahu since then. Anytime that there's a flare-up or a threat to the peace plan, J.D. Vance will end up in Jerusalem, or Marco Rubio will end up in Jerusalem. They've been making sure that they manage him. And finally, a resolution was passed to give backing to President Trump's 20-point peace plan. The United Nations Security has voted in favor of U.S. drafted resolution that endorses President Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza. Included in the plan is the establishment of the International Stabilization Force, and the International Stabilization Force and multiple establishment to which the US says multiple unnamed countries have offered to contribute. The resolution was backed by 13 countries, including the UK, France, Somalia, with none voting against the proposal. Russia and China abstained. Russia and China abstained, and they made very strong statements against the plan, but they did not oppose the plan. I already said yesterday in my video that the Russians had put out an alternative plan, but it was not, they didn't challenge it ultimately, and they allowed that plan to take place. Nevertheless, I have a tweet here by President Trump, who had this to say. He was very celebratory in his speech, and this is what he said. Congratulations to the world on the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the Board of Peace, which will be chaired by me and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. This will go down as one of the biggest approvals in the history of the United Nations, will lead to further peace all over the world, and it's a moment of true historic proportion. Thank you to the United Nations and all of the countries on the UN Security Council: China, Russia, France, United Kingdom, Algeria, Denmark, Greece, Guyana, South Korea, Pakistan, Panama, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, and Somalia. Also, thank you to those countries that weren't on this committee. They strongly back the effort, including Qatar, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Turkey, and Jordan. Members of the board and many more exciting arrangements will be made in the coming weeks. It's quite historic. There's some movement in Gaza. There is some movement. The Hamas themselves have seen that the amount of promise they got, and the fact that they have been somehow curtailed. The pressure was very strong, but the promise also was strong for rehabilitation. They may not play a very active role, but there's no way that you're going to take away Hamas from Gaza. They are going to go underground. And as long as there's peace in their neighborhood, they will be moving forward. One of the countries that has become really influential in President Trump's orbit, as I've said, is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the last holdout in President Trump's effort to have what? The Abraham Accord. If he can back Saudi Arabia to back the Abraham Accord, it would be very, very great for him. Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia will be visiting America, and that will be the first time he'll be visiting in a long time. Relationship between Saudi Arabia and America and most of the West really was damaged when there was a journalist in Washington Post who was killed when he went to marry his wife in Turkey. I think his name is Khashoggi. The Saudi government was blamed, and they were made a pariah state. But Biden met with reality when the Ukraine war started and oil prices went up, and they needed Saudi Arabia to produce a lot of oil. And what did Biden do? He went to Riyadh, and he fist pumped. If you have a picture of the famous fist pump between Biden and bin Salman, he went to plead, please, can you increase your production of oil? Because there was a big problem. In America, yeah, inflation got to numbers they had not seen in a long time. It got over 4%, 5%. Inflation went very high. And interest rates now went up also because of that. Across the whole world, there was massive inflation due to that action. But the Saudis now realize their new power. The Saudis, I live in Saudi Arabia, I keep saying this. Their orientation changed. Their orientation changed from looking for friends, opening new departments in places like Johns Hopkins University in Oxford, departments that there will never be never be gratitude for them. There will always be insults in New York Times. There will always be insults against them in the Telegram and all these other things where they will be denigrated. So what do? If Johns Hopkins wants to open a campus, they will tell them to come over to Saudi Arabia. If they want to open a hospital, they are there in Saudi Arabia now, in Riyadh and in Jeddah. I tell you this, I kid you not. If you really want Saudi money, you have to come to Saudi Arabia. Bin Salman never went anywhere. This is the first trip, and I'm sure it is definitely under the invitation of President Trump that is prompting him to come. Bin Salman decided that everybody will come to Saudi Arabia. And guess who has also been going to golf, sports, rally, Formula One? All of them have all ended in Saudi Arabia. Ronaldo is there now. And it just changed and transformed the image of Saudi Arabia. Most importantly, that money he used to pack as treasury bonds in America, they used it now in the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the PIF, and started to use it to invest aggressively within the Saudi economy, and it has grown very, very, very fast. I see it because I live there, like I always say. And he's coming to America now. He's doing something that no other country in the region there has been able to do. He has acquired promise from President Trump that the Saudis will be acquiring F-35. But it is just like I said, the multipolar world that has created this reality. If you don't sell the F-35 to the Saudis, what will happen? We end up buying the Russian Su-57, or they will buy the Chinese J-35. That is just how it is now. The alternative is out there. It isn't as if, and these are very competent weapon systems. So we already know that the Russians are very aggressively putting out their military hardware now in the Dubai air show that is going on now in Dubai. And when they asked President Trump if he will be selling the F-35 to Bin Salman when he comes, this is what he had to say.
You're hosting Saudi Arabia. Are you planning to sell F-35s to Saudi Arabia? I mean, and also, are you looking at doing a similar security agreement like you did with
No, I am planning on doing that. They want to buy. They've been a great ally. They've got to like us very much. Look at the Iran situation, what we did in terms of obliterating, we obliterated their nuclear capability. Yeah, I will say that we will be doing that. We'll be selling F-35s.
So we'll be selling F-35. Let's not forget that Netanyahu has made sure that the only country that has F-35 in that region is Israel. One of the countries that was supposed to be on the F-35 program, they were early investors in it. They paid early, they paid in advance, and that was Turkey. But when President Trump became president, one of the things extracted from the influencers of President Trump, the donors, no less a person than Maria Alderson, was that Turkey should be kicked out and the Iran JCPOA should be shredded. He did that in his first term, and Erdogan is still struggling to get his own supply of F-35. He finally got frustrated. He has ended up buying the Eurofighter because apart from the F-35, even the F-16s that were in stock in the Turkish Army and Air Force was not allowed to fly. they still lack they lack parts. They're not funded. They're not financed and serviced the way they're supposed to be. And all attempts to even get newer variants of the F-16 has failed because the Israeli lobby is very strong in America, and everybody's expecting that in this particular regard, there's a caveat. It is expected that Saudi Arabia will have to normalize relationship with Israel. This is what Israel and the Netanyahu government has insisted before, believe it or not, approving that the Saudis can get the F-35. Okay, this is where I'll be ending my video for today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Subscribe. If you have any views regarding the opinions I've just expressed, put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Until my next video, you have a good one.